The old woman stepped out of the black car slowly, leaning lightly on her polished wooden cane. The evening air was cool, and the small restaurant in front of her glowed with warm yellow lights. It was not the kind of place most people would expect someone like her to visit. The paint on the walls was simple. The sign above the door was modest. There were no cameras flashing, no reporters waiting. That was exactly how she preferred it. She adjusted the soft gray shawl over her shoulders and walked inside without announcing who she was. To most people, she looked like a well-dressed grandmother enjoying a quiet night out. Only a few people in the city would recognize her face, and none of them were there. The restaurant smelled of fresh bread and spices. Soft music played in the background. Families sat around wooden tables, talking and laughing. A young couple shared dessert in the corner. The place felt alive in a gentle way. A young waitress approached her with a small smile. She looked tired but polite. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her uniform was clean though slightly worn at the sleeves. "Good evening," the waitress said kindly. "Table for one?" The old woman nodded. "Yes, dear. Somewhere quiet if possible." The waitress led her to a small table near the window. "Would you like some water first?" "That would be lovely." Her voice was calm and steady. She watched the waitress walk away. There was something about the girl's movements. Careful, thoughtful, not rushed even though the restaurant was busy. She didn't slam plates down or sigh loudly like some workers did after long hours. She seemed patient. The old woman picked up the menu, but her eyes were not really reading it. She was observing. She had invested in this restaurant years ago when the owner was struggling to keep it open. She never put her name on the door. She never asked for attention. She only wanted to help small businesses grow quietly. She liked to visit from time to time without telling anyone who she was. It helped her see the truth. The waitress returned with water and set it down carefully. As she leaned forward slightly, something caught the old woman's eye. A necklace. It rested gently against the waitress's collarbone. It was delicate but striking. A thin gold chain with a small oval pendant. In the center of the pendant was a tiny blue stone, deep like the ocean just before sunset. Around it was a fine pattern shaped like soft leaves. The old woman's fingers froze around the menu. Her eyes narrowed slightly. It looked familiar. Too familiar. She had seen that design before. Not in a store window. Not in a magazine. In her own home. Many years ago. She kept her expression calm, but her heart gave a slow, heavy beat. "That's a lovely necklace," she said casually, as if it were only small talk. The waitress smiled, almost shyly. "Thank you. It was my grandmother's." The old woman forced a gentle smile. "It's beautiful." She said nothing more about it. But inside, her thoughts began to move quickly. Decades ago, there had been a necklace very much like that one. Not similar. Almost identical. It had been part of her family collection, not because of its price but because of its meaning. It was given to her by her own mother when she was just a young woman learning to run the family business. Her mother had told her, "This is not just gold and stone. It is a reminder to see people for who they are." The necklace had disappeared years later during a time of chaos in her life. There had been business troubles, long travel, staff changes. She remembered searching for it once, asking questions, but eventually letting it go. She had assumed it was lost or stolen, and now here it was, or something that looked exactly like it. She looked at the waitress again. The girl was now helping an elderly couple at another table, listening carefully as they spoke. She bent slightly to hear them better, nodding with patience. When the couple laughed, she laughed softly too. There was no sign of guilt in her face. No nervous glances. No hidden fear. The old woman felt confusion mix with her suspicion. She ordered her meal. The waitress wrote it down carefully and repeated it to make sure she got it right. Her voice was respectful but not overly sweet. Natural. As she walked away again, the pendant caught the light from above and shimmered softly. The old woman's mind drifted back many years. She remembered giving that necklace once. Not to a family member. To someone who had worked in her home. It had been a difficult winter. Snow had covered the city, and business had been struggling. One of the household workers, a quiet and loyal woman, had continued showing up every day despite having her own family problems. The old woman, much younger then, had noticed the worker's silent strength. One evening, she had called her into the study and given her the necklace. "I want you to have this," she had said back then. "You deserve something that reminds you of your worth." The worker had cried. She had refused at first, but eventually she accepted, holding it like it was something fragile and sacred. The memory felt distant, like a dream she had almost forgotten. But was it the same necklace? Or was her mind playing tricks on her? Her meal arrived. The food was simple but warm and comforting. She took small bites, but her thoughts stayed on the pendant across the room. The waitress moved from table to table, carrying trays carefully. At one point, a man at a table raised his voice, complaining about his order. The girl listened without arguing. She apologized calmly and promised to fix it. When she walked back toward the kitchen, she did not roll her eyes or mutter under her breath. She just took a quiet breath and continued working. The old woman noticed these details. She had spent her whole life reading people. It was one reason she had become so successful. She could sense dishonesty quickly. But this girl did not feel dishonest. Still, the necklace would not leave her mind. After finishing her meal, she asked for tea. The waitress brought it with the same steady kindness. "Busy night," the old woman said lightly. "Yes, ma'am," the waitress replied. "But I'm grateful. Busy is better than empty." There was something honest in that answer. The old woman studied her face more closely. There were faint dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were slightly rough, not soft like someone who avoided work. A small bandage wrapped around one finger, probably from a kitchen cut. "Do you like working here?" the old woman asked. "I do," the waitress said. "It helps me take care of my mother." There was no complaint in her tone, just a simple statement. The old woman nodded slowly. "Take care of my mother." She remembered the worker from years ago. That woman also had a daughter she worked hard for. A strange feeling moved through her chest. Not anger, not yet forgiveness either. Something uncertain. She paid the bill quietly and left a generous tip, but nothing unusual enough to attract attention. As she stood to leave, she glanced one more time at the necklace. The blue stone caught the light again. Outside, the driver opened the car door for her. "Home, ma'am?" he asked. She paused before answering. "Yes," she said finally. The car pulled away from the small restaurant. Through the window, she could still see the warm lights inside. She leaned back into the seat and closed her eyes. If that was the same necklace, then it had not been stolen. It had been given. But why did she not clearly remember what happened after that winter? Had the worker kept it? Had she passed it down? And how had it ended up here, on the neck of a young waitress in a small restaurant she quietly owned? Her fingers tightened slightly around her cane. She did not like unanswered questions, but she also did not want to accuse someone innocent. By the time the car reached her large, quiet home, she had made a decision. She would return, not to create a scene, not to demand anything, just to ask. Because sometimes the truth is not found in anger, but in a simple question asked at the right moment. And as she stepped out of the car and looked up at the dark sky, she realized something else. If that necklace truly carried the meaning her mother once gave it, then maybe this was not a coincidence at all. Maybe it was a story waiting to be uncovered. The next day, the old woman woke up earlier than usual. Even though she could afford to sleep late, she felt restless. The memory of the necklace and the young waitress lingered in her mind. She could not stop thinking about it. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the sunlight stretch over the quiet streets. The world seemed ordinary, but her thoughts were anything but. She had spent a lifetime making decisions quickly, trusting her instincts, and yet this felt different. She did not know whether the necklace was hers, or if it was just a coincidence. And if it was hers, why had she never remembered what happened after she gave it away? Why was it on the neck of a waitress in a small restaurant she owned but rarely visited? She could have called her personal assistant immediately, demanding answers, but that was not her way. She wanted to be certain before taking any steps. She wanted the truth, and she wanted it without alarming anyone. After finishing her tea, she picked up her phone and called her assistant quietly. "Please do a small background check on the waitress who works at the little restaurant on Maple Street," she said. Her voice was calm, almost casual, as if she were asking about a casual acquaintance. "No one should know about this. I just want to know her story, nothing more." The assistant agreed. "I'll take care of it, ma'am," he said. "You will have the details by tonight." She hung up the phone and leaned back in her chair. It was strange to think she could spend millions on investments and still feel uncertain about something as simple as a necklace. But this was not about money. It was about trust, about history, and about the unseen connections that sometimes traveled quietly through life. The morning passed slowly. She went about her usual routine, meeting a few business partners, reviewing reports, signing letters. Yet her thoughts kept returning to the necklace. She thought about the young woman's hands, her posture, her gentle patience with customers, the way she moved in the restaurant, careful yet confident. She did not rush, she did not complain, and yet she carried herself with dignity. By afternoon, her assistant sent her the preliminary information. The young waitress was from a small town nearby. She lived with her mother, who was ill and required care. The family had little money, and the waitress worked long hours to support them. She had a strong reputation among neighbors and colleagues. Everyone described her as honest, hardworking, and kind. There were no reports of theft, no records of dishonesty, no history of crime. The old woman read the information slowly, letting each word sink in. Her heart felt lighter. The suspicion she had felt earlier began to fade, replaced by curiosity. If the necklace had not been stolen, then how had it come to be here? Could it be a coincidence? Or had it been passed down through someone who remembered her gift all those years ago? She made a decision. She would visit the restaurant again, not as a guest, not as an investor, but simply as a person who wanted to ask a question. She wanted to understand. She wanted to see the young waitress again, to look at her closely, to speak with her quietly. That evening, she arrived at the restaurant. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow across the street. She stepped inside and immediately spotted the young waitress moving among the tables, carrying trays and serving dishes. She looked exactly the same as the day before, calm, polite, attentive. The old woman took a deep breath and chose a table at the back, near the wall, where she could observe without being obvious. The waitress approached her table with a small smile. "Good evening," she said. "Will you be dining alone again?" "Yes, thank you," the old woman replied. Her voice was steady. She noticed how the waitress's eyes carried a quiet focus, a gentle strength. There was no sign of arrogance, no hint of deceit. Just a young woman doing her best in the world. As the waitress took her order, the old woman's eyes drifted to the necklace again. The pendant caught the light, shimmering softly. She studied it carefully, trying to see every detail. It was the same design she remembered, delicate and precise. She reached out to touch it in her mind, remembering the warmth she had felt when she had given it away so many years ago. Her meal arrived, simple and wholesome, and she ate slowly, savoring each bite. But her mind was elsewhere. She watched the waitress interact with other customers. There was a family with 2 children at a nearby table. The young waitress knelt slightly to speak with them, smiling gently. The children giggled, and she laughed softly with them. The old woman felt a strange emotion rising in her chest. It was a mixture of relief and admiration. This young woman was not just surviving life. She was facing it with dignity and care. After finishing her meal, she asked the waitress for a cup of tea. The waitress returned quickly, setting it down carefully. The old woman looked at her and spoke softly. "You care for your mother?" she asked. The waitress nodded. "Yes, ma'am. She is sick, and I need to take care of her. It is not easy, but I do what I must." The old woman felt a deep respect for her. The young woman's sense of duty, her patience, her humility. It reminded her of someone from long ago, someone who had been faithful, loyal, and true. She realized that suspicion was not the right approach. This was not a person who would steal or betray. If the necklace had come into her hands honestly, then it had been preserved through kindness, not deceit. She decided to be patient. She would wait for the right moment to ask the question that had been on her mind since she first saw the necklace. She did not want to embarrass the young woman or make her feel accused. She wanted to understand, to uncover the story quietly. As she left the restaurant that night, she felt a sense of determination. She would return. She would speak. She would learn the truth. On the way home, she thought about the years that had passed since she had given away the necklace. How time had stretched and bent the lives of people she barely remembered. How small acts of kindness could travel quietly through the world, unnoticed, until they reached someone who needed them. She realized that life often worked in mysterious ways. A simple gift could carry a story for decades. A small act of care could connect strangers across time. And sometimes the truth could be found not in suspicion, but in gentle inquiry. When she reached her quiet home, she sat in her favorite chair and gazed out at the garden. The evening stars were beginning to shine. She thought about the young waitress, about her mother, about the way the necklace had traveled. Her mind was still filled with questions, but now there was hope too. She would not rush. She would not assume. She would watch, she would wait, and she would ask. Because sometimes the most important answers in life come from patience, observation, and the courage to face the unknown with an open heart. And she knew that the next visit to the small restaurant would bring her closer to the story she had been searching for all these years. The next evening, the old woman returned to the restaurant. She arrived a little earlier than usual, before the dinner rush, and the streets were quiet. The soft glow of the restaurant lights welcomed her as she stepped inside. She felt a flutter of nerves, a rare feeling for someone who had faced boardrooms and negotiations with the confidence of a lifelong businesswoman. But this was different. Tonight, she would ask a question that had been on her mind since she first saw the necklace. She chose a table near the center this time, not too far from the kitchen, where she could see the young waitress clearly. She ordered a simple meal, her eyes occasionally drifting toward the girl as she worked. The waitress moved among the tables with her usual grace and care. There was something soothing in the way she carried herself. Calm, precise, and attentive. When she approached the old woman's table to take the order, the grandmother looked up and smiled warmly. "It's me again," she said softly. "I hope I'm not disturbing anyone." The waitress blinked, surprised for a moment, then smiled politely. "Not at all, ma'am. I remember you from yesterday. Would you like the same table?" "Yes, thank you," the old woman replied. She studied the young woman closely. There was something sincere in her expression, a quiet dignity that made it hard to believe that someone like her could ever do wrong. As the waitress walked back to the kitchen, the old woman's eyes were drawn to the necklace again. The pendant glimmered under the soft light. She took a deep breath. Tonight she would ask. She had waited, observed, and reflected. She could no longer carry the doubt quietly in her mind. When the waitress returned with water, the old woman spoke gently. "May I ask you about your necklace?" The waitress's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She touched the small pendant lightly with one finger. "Oh," she said quietly, "of course. What would you like to know?" The old woman leaned forward, speaking softly so only the girl could hear. "It is very beautiful. It looks familiar. I feel as if I've seen it before. Do you know where it came from?" The young waitress took a moment before answering. She looked down at the necklace, her eyes softening. "It belonged to my grandmother," she said. "She gave it to me before she passed. She told me it was special and that I should keep it close, to remember her and the people who have cared for me along the way." The old woman's heart skipped a beat. She felt a strange mixture of relief and curiosity. There was something in the way the girl spoke that seemed honest and heartfelt. She decided to continue carefully. "Do you know how your grandmother got it?" The waitress paused, thinking. "She told me a story once. Many years ago, she worked for a wealthy family. She was very young, and that family, They gave her gifts sometimes, little things to remind her she mattered. The necklace was one of them. She gave it to me to keep me strong and to remember that kindness exists in the world, even when life is hard. The old woman's mind began to wander back decades. She remembered giving a necklace to someone in her household who had worked quietly, faithfully, without asking for recognition or reward. She remembered the gratitude in that person's eyes and the way she had held the gift as though it carried the weight of love itself. Could it be the same necklace? Could this young woman now be carrying it? I see, the old woman said slowly. She chose her words carefully. Your grandmother worked for a family many years ago. Did she ever mention their names? The waitress shook her head. No. She said it was long ago, and the names didn't matter. What mattered was the care and kindness she experienced. She said those things were more important than remembering who gave them. The old woman nodded, feeling a sense of calm beginning to settle over her. She reached for her tea and took a small sip. The warmth of the cup seemed to settle the nervous energy she had felt all day. She realized that the necklace had traveled through time quietly, through small acts of loyalty and love, until it had reached the young waitress. It was not stolen. It had not been lost. It had been preserved, cherished, and finally passed down. Your grandmother must have been very special, the old woman said softly, to give something like that to you, knowing you would carry it and care for it. She was, the waitress replied. Her eyes glistened slightly. She told me that gifts are not always about what they are made of, but about what they represent. That kindness and trust can last longer than anything else. The old woman felt a lump in her throat. She remembered her own mother saying the same thing to her, many years ago, about the necklace she had given away. It was meant to carry a message of trust, care, and dignity. And now, after all these years, that message had reached someone who needed it, someone who would carry it with respect. For a moment, they sat in silence, connected by an invisible thread that stretched across time. The old woman looked closely at the young waitress and saw not just a server in a small restaurant, but a woman who had endured challenges, faced hardships, and still remained honorable. The waitress noticed the grandmother's gaze and smiled gently. I know it may seem strange, but I've always felt a connection to that necklace. Even before my grandmother gave it to me, I felt it had a story. I didn't know the details, but I knew it belonged to someone who valued it. The old woman nodded again. She felt a deep respect for the young woman's honesty. It seems you were right to feel that way, she said softly. Some things carry stories, and sometimes they find their way back to people who will honor them. The waitress's expression softened. I've always wanted to understand the story fully. I never thought it would lead to someone like you. The old woman smiled, a warm and gentle smile. Life has a way of connecting people in ways we cannot always predict. Sometimes a simple gift can carry meaning for decades, traveling quietly until it reaches the right person at the right time. They talked quietly for a while longer, sharing stories of family, memories, and the small moments that shaped their lives. The old woman learned about the young woman's mother, her struggles, and her dreams. She learned about the sacrifices she had made and the quiet courage she displayed every day. As the evening wore on, the old woman felt a sense of closure she had not expected. The necklace was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of human connection, trust, and care. And she realized that she had been given a second chance. A chance to witness how a small act of kindness from decades ago could continue to shape lives in ways she had never imagined. When it was time to leave, the old woman thanked the young waitress sincerely. You have honored your grandmother and everyone who came before her, she said. And you have reminded me that kindness, trust, and care are timeless. The waitress smiled, a soft and humble smile. Thank you. That means a lot to me. The old woman walked to the door slowly, feeling a sense of peace. She knew she would return to the restaurant, but she also knew that the question she had carried for so long had been answered. The necklace had not been lost. It had not been stolen. It had been passed down through generations, preserved by honesty, respect, and love. As she stepped outside into the cool evening air, she looked up at the sky. The stars were beginning to shine, small points of light scattered across the dark canvas. She thought about how small actions could ripple through time, how a simple gift could carry a story for decades, and how people who face life with dignity and kindness often leave a mark that is far greater than wealth, power, or fame. She felt a quiet gratitude for the young waitress, for her grandmother, for the memory of her own mother, for the necklace that had traveled through time, carrying a message of hope, trust, and care. And she knew that some stories, no matter how long they take to unfold, are worth waiting for. The old woman could not stop thinking about the young waitress after that evening. The conversation they had shared replayed in her mind like a gentle song. She kept thinking about the way the girl had spoken about her grandmother, the way she cared for her mother, and the quiet dignity she carried even while facing the struggles of everyday life. There was something remarkable about her, something rare that money could never buy. The next morning, the old woman woke up with a clear sense of purpose. She could no longer see the necklace simply as an object, nor the young waitress merely as an employee. She had to understand the full story and ensure that the legacy of kindness she had once started was honored. She decided to visit the restaurant again, but this time not just to observe. She wanted to listen, to speak with the waitress more deeply, and to reflect on the past that had brought them to this point. She prepared herself carefully, choosing a soft scarf and a simple coat. There was no need for extravagance or display. She wanted the encounter to feel natural and personal. When she entered the restaurant, the young waitress greeted her with the same polite smile. She recognized her immediately, and there was a quiet warmth in her eyes. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome back." "Thank you," the old woman replied softly. She chose a table near the back, as she had done before, giving herself a full view of the restaurant. The young waitress moved gracefully among the other guests, tending to their needs with care. The old woman watched quietly, noticing small gestures. The way she adjusted a chair for an elderly customer, the way she knelt slightly to listen to a child, the gentle tone in her voice when she explained a menu item. Every detail reminded the old woman of what she had once valued most in people: honesty, patience, and a willingness to care for others without expecting anything in return. She realized that the young waitress embodied all of those qualities. When the waitress came to take her order, the old woman decided it was time to speak more openly. "Would you mind if we talked for a few minutes after your shift?" she asked gently. The young woman looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, ma'am. I would be happy to." The old woman ate her meal slowly, savoring each bite while continuing to watch the waitress work. She felt a growing sense of admiration for the young woman, mixed with a deep curiosity about the necklace. She knew it had been given to someone long ago, but she needed to understand how it had traveled through time to reach this point. As the restaurant began to quiet down and the last customers left, the young waitress came to sit across from her. She was tired, but her posture remained upright, and her eyes carried the same gentle focus the old woman had noticed before. "I want to understand more about your grandmother," the old woman began. "She was the one who gave you the necklace?" The young woman nodded. "Yes, she told me stories about her past and the people she worked for. She never mentioned names, only that she had been treated with kindness, and that the necklace was a reminder of that." The old woman listened carefully, taking in every word. She remembered the winter decades ago, when she had given a necklace to a loyal worker in her household. She had done it quietly, without fanfare, simply to acknowledge her dedication and character. She had never thought about what would happen to it afterward, never imagined that it would one day appear in the hands of someone she had never met again. "Do you know why your grandmother gave it to you?" the old woman asked softly. The young woman smiled faintly. "She wanted me to remember that life is made up of small acts of care, that people who show kindness, even when they have little, are the ones who make the world better. She said I should keep it close, to remind myself of that every day." The old woman felt a lump in her throat. The words were familiar, echoing her own thoughts from decades ago. She realized that the necklace had not been lost, nor had it been taken. It had traveled through generations, preserved by honesty and care, until it had found someone who would honor it. "You have carried it well," she said softly. "You have honored your grandmother's gift, and in doing so, You have reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. The young woman looked at her with quiet curiosity. What do you mean? I once gave that necklace to someone many years ago, the old woman explained slowly. It was a gift of trust and care, not wealth. It was meant to remind them of their worth and the goodness in the world. I had almost forgotten who had it and how it might have traveled through time. Seeing you wear it now, it brings back the meaning I wanted it to carry. The young woman's eyes widened in surprise. Are you saying it came from your family? The old woman nodded. Yes, I gave it long ago to someone who worked faithfully and with integrity. And now it has reached you. You have honored it, even without knowing the full story. For a moment, they sat in silence, each lost in thought. The old woman felt a wave of relief and gratitude. She realized that the necklace was more than a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of human connection, trust, and the quiet strength that people carry through life. It had traveled through time and circumstance, carrying its message intact. The young woman's voice broke the silence. I never knew the full story. I only knew it was special and that I should keep it safe. I've always felt a connection to it, even when I didn't understand why. The old woman smiled warmly. Sometimes the most important things in life are the ones we cannot fully explain. They are meant to be felt, to guide us quietly, and to remind us of what truly matters. They spoke for a while longer, sharing stories of family, life, and the small moments that shape who we become. The old woman learned more about the young woman's mother, her sacrifices, and the challenges she faced. She listened to the young woman's hopes and dreams, and she was struck by her resilience and humility. As the evening came to a close, the old woman felt a sense of closure she had not expected. The necklace had not been lost. It had not been stolen. It had been preserved and carried forward by honesty, respect, and love, and she had been given a chance to witness that journey firsthand. When she stood to leave, she looked at the young waitress with admiration. You have honored your grandmother and everyone who came before her, she said softly, and you have reminded me that kindness and trust are timeless. They can survive decades and touch people we may never expect. The young woman smiled, a mixture of humility and pride. Thank you. That means more to me than I can say. The old woman stepped outside into the cool night air. She felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. The stars were beginning to shine in the sky, small points of light scattered across the darkness. She thought about how small acts of kindness could ripple through time, how a simple gift could carry a story for decades, and how people who face life with dignity and care often leave a mark far greater than wealth or fame. She realized that some stories, no matter how long they take to unfold, are worth waiting for. They teach us patience, humility, and the quiet power of human connection. As she walked toward her car, she felt a sense of fulfillment. She had seen the legacy of her past action preserved in someone who truly deserved it. And she knew that the young woman would continue to carry the necklace with respect, understanding its meaning and the story it represented. Life, she thought, has a way of bringing people together at the right moment. And sometimes, the smallest gifts carry the greatest messages, waiting patiently to touch the right heart. The old woman returned home that night with a sense of peace she had not felt in years. She knew that the story of the necklace was far from over, but she also knew that it was now in the right hands. It had traveled, been preserved, and finally found someone who could honor its true meaning. And in that quiet understanding, she felt a connection that spanned generations, a reminder that trust, kindness, and care are treasures that endure far longer than time itself. The old woman woke up the next morning with a sense of quiet determination. The necklace, the young waitress, and the story that had traveled decades across time weighed gently on her mind. She knew the next step she had to take. It was no longer enough to observe, to reflect, or to question quietly. It was time to reveal a truth she had kept hidden for many years. She had to meet the young woman fully, and let her know the meaning of the necklace she had carried so faithfully. She dressed carefully that morning. Her clothes were simple but elegant, nothing flashy. She wanted the moment to be personal, genuine, and free of any pretense. As she left her quiet home and stepped into her car, She felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She had faced countless challenges in her life, business deals, public scrutiny, and life-changing decisions, but nothing compared to this. This was not about money or reputation. This was about human connection, trust, and understanding. When she arrived at the restaurant that evening, it was nearly empty. A few regular customers lingered, chatting softly over their meals. The young waitress moved efficiently, her gentle smile unchanged from before. She looked tired, yet there was a quiet strength in the way she carried herself. The old woman felt a surge of admiration and respect. She had been carrying this story inside her heart for decades, and now it was time to share it. The waitress approached the table where the old woman sat. "Good evening, ma'am," she said politely. "It's nice to see you again." "Good evening," the old woman replied, smiling warmly. "May I speak with you for a few moments after your shift?" The young woman nodded, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Of course." The evening passed slowly. The waitress tended to the remaining tables, helping customers with patience and kindness. The old woman observed quietly, noticing every small gesture. The way she adjusted a chair for a customer, how she smiled softly at a child, the way she carried herself with dignity despite fatigue. Each movement reminded the old woman of the years gone by, of the loyalty and grace she had once admired in someone she had given the necklace to decades ago. Finally, as the last customer left and the restaurant grew quiet, the young waitress came to sit across from her. She looked tired, yet her eyes were bright, alert, and full of respect. The old woman felt a wave of emotion, anticipation, relief, and a quiet happiness. "It is time I tell you the truth," the old woman began softly. "I have watched you these past days, and I have listened to your stories about your grandmother and this necklace. I want you to understand something important." The young woman leaned forward slightly, her attention focused entirely on the older woman. "What is it?" she asked softly. The old woman took a deep breath. "Many years ago, I gave this necklace to a loyal worker in my household. It was a gift of trust, care, and respect. I wanted them to know that they were valued, that their dedication and honesty mattered. I never imagined that it would one day travel to someone like you, carrying its meaning across generations." The young woman's eyes widened. You gave it to someone in your family?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The old woman shook her head gently. "No, I gave it to someone who worked for us, someone who showed loyalty, kindness, and quiet strength. And now it has reached you. You have carried it with honor, even without knowing the full story. You have preserved its meaning." Tears welled up in the young woman's eyes. She touched the pendant lightly, as if confirming that it was real. "I never knew," she whispered. "I only knew it was special, that it belonged to someone who cared about me even before I understood why." The old woman reached across the table and took her hand gently. "It is true. That necklace has traveled through time quietly, preserved by honesty and love. And now it rests with someone who embodies the values it was meant to represent. You have honored it fully." The young woman sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of the words. Then she spoke softly, her voice full of emotion. "I can't believe this, that it came from you. I've always felt it had a story, but I never imagined it would be connected to someone like you. I've tried to live with the same care and honesty my grandmother taught me, and now I understand why it was so important." The old woman smiled warmly. "You have not only understood it, but you have lived it. And now I want to help you in any way I can. I know the struggles you face. Supporting your mother, trying to build a life, carrying responsibilities far beyond your years. I want to support you quietly, without publicity, so you can achieve the goals you dream of." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. I have worked hard, but I never expected this. I never expected someone to see me, to understand, and to help without asking for anything in return." The old woman squeezed her hand gently. "Sometimes the most meaningful help is quiet and sincere. Money, gifts, or recognition are not the point. It is the opportunity to continue a legacy, to honor the values that have carried this necklace across generations. I want to help you with your education, with your mother's care, and with the opportunities that you deserve. But I also want you to continue living with the integrity and dignity you already show every day. The young woman's voice shook as she spoke. I promise I will. I will never forget this, and I will honor it in everything I do. This changes my life. The old woman nodded. She felt a deep satisfaction. It was more than just seeing the story come full circle. It was witnessing the power of trust, care, and kindness traveling across time. The young woman had faced struggles, yet she remained honest, humble, and committed to doing good. The necklace had chosen its bearer wisely. For the next hour, they spoke quietly about life, family, and the small acts of care that often go unnoticed. The old woman learned more about the young woman's mother, her hopes, and her dreams. She discovered the resilience and courage that had guided this young woman through hardship, and she felt proud and grateful to see that the legacy of the necklace was alive and strong. As the evening drew to a close, the old woman stood and prepared to leave. She looked at the young waitress and smiled. You have carried this gift well, and now you carry a story that spans generations. Remember that kindness, trust, and care are more powerful than anything else. And know that you are supported, not just by me, but by all those who have traveled this path before you. The young woman nodded, tears still in her eyes. I will remember. I will honor it. Thank you for trusting me, for sharing this with me, and for believing in me. The old woman stepped outside into the cool night air. The stars were shining softly above, small points of light scattered across the darkness. She felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that the necklace had found the right hands, that its story had been preserved, and that the legacy of trust and kindness would continue. As she walked to her car, she reflected on how life works in mysterious ways. Small actions, quiet gestures, and moments of care can travel across time and reach places we never expect. A gift given with sincerity can echo for decades, touching lives, shaping futures, and creating connections that endure far longer than wealth, power, or fame. She returned home that night with a sense of fulfillment she had never known. She had witnessed the journey of the necklace, the continuation of a legacy, and the quiet triumph of honesty and integrity. She knew that the young waitress would continue to wear the necklace, not only as a piece of jewelry but as a symbol of trust, care, and the enduring power of human connection. The old woman went to bed that night with a calm heart. She thought about the generations that had carried the necklace, the lives it had touched, and the young woman who now wore it with dignity. She realized that some stories take decades to unfold, but when they do, they reveal the quiet beauty of human resilience and kindness. In the days that followed, she kept in touch with the young waitress quietly. She arranged for support for her education, medical care for her mother, and guidance to help her achieve her dreams. She did all of this without seeking recognition, just as she had given the necklace all those years ago. Quietly, sincerely, and with care, the young woman continued to wear the necklace every day. It reminded her not only of her grandmother's love, but also of the values of trust, kindness, and perseverance. She carried herself with confidence, knowing that she was part of a story that stretched across decades, connecting past, present, and future through simple acts of care. And the old woman, now able to rest with a full heart, understood something deeply important, that the smallest gestures, the quietest gifts, and the simplest acts of trust can leave the greatest impact. The necklace had traveled through time, preserved by human goodness, and it had finally reached the right place. It was a story of connection, of care, and of the enduring strength of the human spirit, a story that would continue for generations to come. In the quiet of her home that night, she looked out at the stars and smiled. She knew that the legacy she had begun so long ago was alive, thriving, and in capable hands. And she understood fully that the true value of any gift is not in its beauty or its cost, but in the hearts it touches, the lives it changes, and the trust it carries forward. Some stories, she thought, are worth waiting for, and some gifts, no matter how small, carry meaning far beyond what we can imagine. The necklace was one of those gifts, and now its story was complete. Yet just beginning anew, in the hands of someone who would honor it every single day.